Bunny Kingdom. Okay, well, weird theme, but anyway, it's bunnies. Bunnies are harmless, they're lovely, nothing ever bad or, scary or anything came out of watching anything with bunnies.
Run for your lives!
Hi everyone, thanks for tuning in to another Broken Meeple review. I'm Luke Hector, and today I've got one of the weirdest theme games I've seen in a long time. Now, the name has probably already put half of you off watching this video, but let me reel you back in and explain a bit more about what this game is all about. Bunny Kingdom is a fairly new game by Richard Garfield. Now, most people know Richard Garfield from King of Tokyo fame to Magic the Gathering, Netrunner. This is a guy that has gone places. This is a guy with pedigree in the board gaming world. And from IELLO Games, who produce a lot of great fairly gateway-ish games. I mean, they do some heavier stuff now and again, but generally IELLO is all about the simpler games, the lighter games, and certainly the well-produced and colourful games. I can't think of a game by IELLO that isn't lavishly produced and bright. There's just something about the way they do things, and I approve, of course. But the idea with Bunny Kingdom is that you are playing cards, you're drafting cards from a giant deck that contains various different types, and with these cards, you are placing your bunnies on this grid map. The map is full of different types of terrain, like rivers and desert mountains and plains, etc. And the idea is that you're trying to build up fiefs. Now, this name gets on my nerves. The word fief, F-I-E-F. Why couldn't they just say towns? Would have been better. But the idea is that you're trying to build up these large fiefs, and with these, you're scoring points at the end of every round. The idea is, though, that the points are scored based on your wealth times your strength. Little mathematical formula. And strength is based on how many cities you have and how powerful those cities are. And wealth is how many resources, different types of resources, in fact, that your fief produces. It's pretty straightforward in terms of how things score, and the drafting is simple as well. You're basically taking a hand of 10 cards, 10 to 12, depending on the player count, and you will choose 2, pass them, resolve, choose another 2, pass them, basically drafting like you do in Seven Wonders, Sushi Go, and pretty much every other game you've heard of with the drafting mechanic. Now, a lot of people are going to be put off by the theme, Bunny Kingdom, that sounds like a kid's game. Well, the bunnies is it's a pasted theme in the sense, it could have been Turtle Kingdom. It could have been Medieval Kingdom. It could have been Space Ninja Kingdom. I don't know, for all it mattered. You're just placing these little miniature bunnies on the board as you play cards that correspond to places in the grid. It really doesn't matter for the fact they're bunnies. It just means that you can have carrot as a resource. It's literally there as a light-hearted theme. So if you're worried about it being too kiddie, then don't. This isn't a theme that's designed to be for kids. It's just light, colourful, and gives way to some really good artwork. The artwork in this is gorgeous, and you've got all these sort of anthropomorphic bunnies in medieval armour and swords and fighting and villagers and stuff like that. It's really good to look at, even when you've kind of finished your turn and you're just looking at the cards going, oh, that looks nice, that looks nice. So bright, colourful, lavishly produced. The board is bright, colourful and gorgeous as well, with a huge score track on the right and the massive grid there. It takes a reasonable amount of space on the table, but not too much that it becomes a massive table hog. And that's essentially it. You have essentially the board and a bunch of cards. You get a few little tokens to deal with various types of farms and resources that you can get, and a few plastic miniature cities that you can place your little bunnies in as they appear on the board. And that's about it though in terms of its contents, but all the contents, whether it be your bunnies or your cities or anything, are all really nicely produced. This is one gorgeous production for a game. I expect no less of IELLO, and they haven't disappointed here. This will look the part on the table. So everything sounds pretty simplistic. Draft a couple of cards, do this a few times, score up, rinse, repeat for a few rounds. Where's the game? The game is all in that drafting phase, and it's a lot of fun. You know, the scoring phase is basically just looking at all your stuff and scoring it up, and I'll get onto that a bit later as a minor negative, but the drafting is straightforward. If you've played a drafting game, you know half the rules to this. You know, everybody who's played drafting games knows how to draft by now, and it's the same here. 2 cards, pass. 2 cards, pass. Until eventually you've done it 5 or 6 times and all the cards are resolved. You've got lots of different types of cards though in this one deck. Most of them are territory cards. They correspond to the board, and when you play them, you put a bunny there. Some of them allow you to place farms and special luxury resources on the board to increase the wealth of your fiefs. Some of them allow you to actually build cities during the construction phase, which takes place in between scoring and drafting. In addition to this though, you also have parchment cards that are acting like endgame scoring objectives that you can go for. You know, like if you produce 7 carrots, you'll get this many points. If you have lots of guys on the edge, you'll get points. If you have the most fish, you'll get points. You know, things like that. Lots of cool stuff to aim for. And on top of that, you get some treasure cards, which are just straight up points. There's quite a fair amount of paths to victory in terms of how you're going to score, but ideally you want to get a little bit of the board state and a bit of the parchment cards in order to do well. But you can emphasize one or the other, and I've seen both strategies work fine. The first game I played of this, I came second to somebody who only beat me by about 6 points. I think it was 6 to 8 points, and both of us were very different. He had gone for mostly the board state and had done pretty well on that board state. For me, I didn't do that well on the board, but I was grabbing a ton of them parchment cards and I was meeting the conditions. Sadly, just not quite enough to beat him. But it shows that there are many ways that you can play this game. Granted, you're going to be doing mostly either board state or the parchment cards, but whether you aim for specific resources or how you're going to place your bunnies, are you going to go mass cities, are you going to avoid them entirely depending on what the parchments want, you know, there's a lot of different ways you can play. And again, the game is not exactly that long either. It takes about 45 minutes to an hour usually. With 4 players, maybe slightly longer, especially if you're learning the game. But nah, honestly, you should be able to have this done and dusted within about an hour. And that's a good length for a sort of fairly finky drafting game. The main issue with time comes more from the scoring phase. Now, this isn't anything to do with AP or anything. In fact, there's not a lot of AP in this game. You're drafting 2 cards out of about 10 to 12, depending on player count. There's not that much to look at, and the cards are pretty easy to distinguish. So you shouldn't have people constantly going, oh, I don't know which card to play, oh my god. You know, it's not a heavy game. This is fairly light. But where the time drags a little bit is the scoring. In the scoring phase, you have to look on this board, and it's busy. It is one busy board. And you're looking over and you're trying to see, right, that's a fief there, that's got 4 towers in it and 3 resources. Okay, that's 12, score that one. And then this one is that, oh, that doesn't have a city, that doesn't score. And then this one, and you're doing that for all the players. Now with 2 of you, it's not that big a deal. 3, not too bad. 4, it gets quite crowded, and the scoring phase is one of those things where the game kind of goes, oh yeah, enjoying the drafting, yeah, this is progressing nicely, halt. Okay, draft, halt. It brings the game to an abrupt stop, like almost like you're at the traffic lights, and forces you to worry about the scoring phase. Now, of course, it's part and parcel of the game, and depending on your mental arithmetic and how good you are, I mean, they even give you a reference card for, working out the multiplication. To be honest, it's not working out the multiplication, we've all done our times table as kids, that slows the game down. It's the fact that you've got to count out lots of different cities, you've got to pick them out on the board, because it's not easy to distinguish, oh yeah, that's my fief, yeah. Especially if someone's done a huge giant fief, or connected it up with these sky towers that allow you to connect ones across the map, then it gets pretty fiddly. But, that aside, the rest of the game, pretty streamlined, pretty straightforward. Once you've got to grips as to what each of the different cards do, you're well on your way to playing this game. You can pick up and play this game in a pretty short amount of time. In fact, I'd say the rulebook makes it probably slightly more complicated than it actually is. It's not a bad rulebook, but maybe it could have just been laid out in a slightly more, logical fashion, but most of it is kind of artwork all over the place. So you're kind of trying to pick out, oh yeah, that's relevant, you know, and you, like I say, simple game, not a big deal. The drafting phase itself, though, like I say, is the crux of this game, and you'll be making like several important decisions frequently each round. You know, those first 10 cards you get, you're looking forward to particular territories, and like, can I expand my city into there? Ah, no, I don't have it. But ooh, that parchment looks good. Oh, but I could do with a level 3 city. Maybe I should get that first. So there's lots of cool decisions to make. Not brain burning or anything. This is still fairly light. You shouldn't be in a state where you're like, I don't know what I'm doing. What do I do here? No, you shouldn't have that problem. You should be able to at least focus on something, whether it's parchments, treasure, or the board state. But you're constantly deciding, oh, which of these cards do I prefer? And you really must pay attention to your opponents. One thing that is missing from a few drafting games is that bare necessity of keeping an eye on what your opponent's got. Because there are some drafting games I've played where, yeah, granted, you might be able to try and stop your opponent, but it kind of hurts you as much as it hurts them. So most people don't bother. And the mindset of most players is that they'll think more about their own state rather than someone else's. In here, though, you really need to think about your opponent's state. Because if you're about to pass them a territory card that allows them to get a giant fief on the board, it's your fault if they win because you gave them that card. It might be worth you just putting a bunny there, may not score you any points, but it denies them points. And sometimes that's actually worth more in this game. Now with 4 players, that's a little bit tricky to micromanage because you'll be trying to do it to one neighbor and then you might find somebody else isn't doing it on their side. But in 2 players, I mean, I like this with 2, 3, or 4 players. I would play this with any player count. I would play this, you know, no matter what. But 3 players is a good sweet spot. Again, burning, you know, record breaking all the time. 4 players is good. It's not too long. Hour, maybe just over. That's decent enough length for me. I'm cool with that. It just makes the scoring a little bit more fiddly. 2 players though, this game shines. I mean, you will have enough cards, you'll have plenty of stuff on the board, but the hate drafting element really comes into play more because you're really paying attention to what your opponent's got to do. And 3 players just makes it a little bit more clustered on the board, you know, since 3 is a particular sweet spot. But I find this game scales very well. 2, 3, 4, don't mind, don't care, I'll play it with any count. So Bunny Kingdom is a solid game all round. Lavish production, gorgeous artwork, cutesy theme even if slightly pasted on. Scales well with 2, 3 or 4 players. Doesn't go any longer than about 75 minutes even with the slowish players or your first time playing. Works brilliantly at 2 with the hate drafting and micromanaging, but works just as well as 4 player with the tension of, oh, they're going to nick my spots before me, and the drafting of the cards. You've got multiple paths to victory, you know, not tons, but you've got enough. And the game is ripe for expansion because all they need to do is just bring in a new type of card and just tweak the rules for how many cards you draw or draft, you know, and it will still be great fun. Really, the only minor flaw I have with it is more that the theme is pretty much just a paste-on job, but then there's only so much you can do with a drafting area control game. And perhaps I would like a bit more variety in the cards in future. You know, you've got a lot of those territory cards, you've got the parchments and the treasures. I'd like to see maybe a small mini expansion come out for this just to give me more cards, really add to that variety. But it's a solid belter of a game, another great one from IELLO and Garfield. Personally, it's a 9, it's staying in my collection. Solid game all round and definitely one you should check out. Don't let this whole Bunny Kingdom thing scare you off. It's a great game, definitely worth your time and money to get. So that's it for me for another Broken Meeple review. See you next time, I've got some belters coming up. Take care, see you soon.